All of our people are stressed. All of our systems are stressed. All of our resources are stressed. What are we going to do about that, right? If something happens, how are we going to cope with it? Are we living on the edge? If you feel like you are, remember that feeling when you were a kid and you were running down a hill really fast and you were going so fast, like you just knew you were gonna crash.
Mm-hmm.
You were running faster than your legs, or you couldn't control the bike, and you were gonna crash. If your business feels like that, then it's time to take a step back, right? It's time to start planning for what are we gonna do when we hit that little patch of ground where we trip or we hit the pothole with our bike and we're going to go over the handlebars.
Hey there, friend. It's Stefanie Krievins, founder of the Troublemaker Nation and your host for the Hot Mess Hotline, where we are having conversations for mid-level leaders who think like the entrepreneur. And today we are so lucky to have with us an entrepreneur, a CEO, Doug Miller with Brightworks, who's going to share with us some of his lessons learned around stability and change management as we're emerging from the immediate disaster response part of COVID-19. Doug, we're going to have your bio in the show notes, but what's your street cred? Tell us a little bit about, what's most important for listeners to know about you before we get into our conversation today.
Sure. So I'm a technology executive, long-time technology executive, about 30 years in the field in one capacity or another. The Brightworks Group is a company I started 8 years ago as a IT operations company. What we do is we help companies put in place good, solid IT operations that are predictable across the board in every respect, both in terms of performance and the financials associated with them. I literally grew up with this technology. I, built a computer on a breadboard when I was a kid and have watched it all evolve over time. So I've seen a lot of the ups and downs of the industry, and it's been an interesting education across 30 years.
Awesome. I cannot wait to learn from everything that you've learned. Friends, let's get into this conversation where Doug and I are going to talk about urgency, stability, and the lessons learned from COVID-19 as we move forward. Let's do this.
Thanks for having me on.
I really do appreciate your IT approach. You have a rare thing going on, and it's just refreshing to hear it and help share that message. And I think people need some more straight talk in this area.
We see it. We see it in prospects and customers, and we see it in our partners.
Mm-hmm.
We see it in our competitors.
Mm-hmm.
We see it in other similar companies to ours that come to us for advice.
Mm.
And it is a repeated thing, right? They have no way to capture concretely anything about what they're doing. They have no metrics.
That's right.
They have no way to measure and say, this is what I should expect out of my employees. This is what I should expect out of my sales effort. They're not even doing things as simple as watching their cash flow,
mm-hmm.
which, just astounds me. And how can you as a business owner, how can you as a leader make any sort of decisions? You don't have you have no information. You're completely making these based off your gut.
That's right.
And it's completely intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care how experienced you are or how long you've been in business, making intuitive gut level decisions is a risk. It's a hell of a risk.
It is.
let alone how can you have any expectations of your team if there's no way to measure that? It's variable day to day, which, ultimately, sort of turns things into, for employees, feeling like they're living in an abusive relationship.
Yes. Yep.
Because the ball, the goalposts are moving all the time.
Yes.
And
situations where I have to fire myself as a coach because it's like I can't be complicit in that dysfunction, that codependency, because it's no longer safe to speak up. It's no longer safe to say you can't keep moving the goalposts. Obviously, COVID-19 has done something else there, but
yeah, I mean, it's moved a lot of goalposts for a lot of people, but if your organization isn't resilient enough to deal with that. And certainly if you are acting in the ways we've been talking about, your organization's not going to be resilient enough to deal with COVID-19.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And again, I've seen some of that stuff from prospects and not so much customers, but prospects and certainly competitors who, man, they're just, I'm going to say this and it sounds a little bad. This has been a great time for us, right? And I don't say that with sort of any relish, because obviously nobody wants the deaths, nobody wants the horrible economic situation and other businesses going out of business, etc. But at the end of the day, what I sell is something that people in this situation need.
Right.
And so we have stayed busy. We have closed really a major deal almost really about every week since this started. And it's really been about two things. Number one, we're in the right space, right? Like I said, we have a thing people need right now.
And your people, what they need.
We know what they need. We know what our team needs, so they're able to deliver it. And we made a very concerted effort well in advance of this over the last 2 years to have built up our pipeline, to have a healthy sales effort, to have a logical, measurable process to bring in new leads and to keep the business going.
Yes.
And I set up the business in such a way. My background is an engineer. I'm a technical person, and ultimately, if I could go heads down and do technical stuff all the time, I'd be deliriously happy from a personal perspective. I do almost no technical stuff anymore because I've set up a team that does all that stuff.
That's right.
I don't have anything to do with operations. And what that meant was that I was free to focus on sales. I was free to focus on how we were going to navigate this stuff. Because I wasn't so much in the running of the day-to-day business. And being freed up with that kind of stuff meant that I could make sure that deals kept coming, and we were after new customers, and that I've kept networking, and I've stayed in touch with everybody we were staying in touch. So with prior to this. So, we've just kind of had the momentum to keep going through all of this. I know I've talked to a lot of other people who were like, yeah, our sales pipeline just completely dried up right at the beginning. Well, you didn't probably have a pipeline. You probably didn't have a process.
But yes, the foundation, the process, the stability.
You didn't have that stuff. You were, again, not doing anything measurable from a day-to-day perspective, right? What are you doing? Is it, what are your sales metrics? And I don't mean metrics in terms of, it's real easy to go, well, we want to do $4 million of sales this quarter. That's not a metric. That's a hope. That's an aspirational goal.
Yes.
What are the executable things that you're going to measure, that you're going to do every day to
That's
move
right.
things along, right?
That's within your control.
That are
that
within
you
your
will,
control, right?
yes.
That you yourself or your organization can do. And then I hear from other people going, well, we don't have any new leads, we don't have any new business, we don't have any new whatever. And I go, so, for example, I've had a number of people that I've introduced to our lead generation company. And I was talking to the guy that owns the lead generation company, and he's like, yeah, a bunch of those people have put us on hold. And then I talk to them and they go, yeah, we don't have any leads.
Can I be Captain Obvious here?
Yeah.
Can I be Captain Obvious? Now is the time to invest in this stuff.
Right.
Now is the time.
Why did you stop?
Yes, yes.
And now it's going to take months for you to get it going again.
Yes.
And you're going to be right back where you were. And the thing that drives me nuts is that person is then going to say, that lead gen approach didn't work.
Yeah.
No, that was not the problem.
Yes.
Right?
Well, hey, can I ask you a question to kind of catapult off of this here?
Mm-hmm.
So we've been jamming on some of the foundational principles that, you have to have in place for a business to weather a storm like this. And I call this a storm, right? This is an economic and health disaster. It is a hurricane making slow movement across land and just wreaking havoc along the way. But from your perspective, and I want to ask both sides of this, but what are the strengths that have been revealed about your company going through a disaster, for lack of better words?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that have really come out. One is that, and this is helped considerably by the fact that we have a relatively small team for our size. Mm-hmm. And we have a small team because we've really heavily slanted the company towards using outside experts to do the things that we're not skilled at, right? Yep. So I have a very good marketing company. I have a very good outsourced CFO/accounting group. I have all my HR outsourced to a PEO. So the team that I have they're 100% the core of our business. Mm-hmm. That team also has been with us for a long time. My newest or shortest tenure staff member has been with us now 4 years. So we don't have a lot of turnover. The team knows each other. They're used to each other. And I've made a very deliberate effort to build capacity in that team that allows them to operate without my intervention. Mm. So we came from a largely remote work background anyway as a company. Mm-hmm. The last couple of years we've been in an office space, but it's actually a co-working area. And when we decided to pull out of it, it wasn't complex for us. We were already used to doing it, right? We're used to working remotely, and we're used to using the tools for that. So because we had rehearsed it and practiced it and knew how to do it, and had the capacity, right? The team knew they were empowered, knew that they had the accountability and authority to run their portion of the business. We were able to just up stakes, everybody go home, everybody not physically see each other for 8-10 weeks now, and carry on like business as usual, right? We didn't have anybody that got, into that situation of going home and going, well, I don't know how to conduct myself. So we made this disaster feel from an operations perspective no different than at any other time for us.
Mm-hmm.
It really was just in the evening you're not going to go to a restaurant, but during the day it was kind of not a
You're
big
gonna
deal.
work. Yes.
And our business model is such, and what we've always tried to do with our customers is such that we were always pushing them to accept and allow us to put things in place to allow to make it possible for us to support them remotely.
Mm-hmm.
My business model is a flat fee per user per month for what we do for IT operations and support. So me sending somebody on site always is going to cost me more than if we can do something remotely, right? And having to do something for a customer versus not having to do something for a customer is always going to cost me more.
Right.
So as a business, what we've set up are a couple of things. One was to make sure that as often as possible, we didn't have to go on site.
Mm-hmm.
But even more importantly, as often as possible, to not have things break in the first place that requires intervention. It's really fundamental to our business model.
I love that proactivity.
And that's how we market it. I mean, it's why I started the business 8 years ago was
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a high functioning autistic person, and I hate surprises.
I
hate them. Absolutely loathe surprises.
could see that. Mm-hmm.
And it's driven me to design a business that eliminates as many surprises as possible, right?
Yes.
And it turns out that business owners, when it comes to their IT, really hate surprises. Nobody wants that, right? Because we've stayed focused on that. Because up front we said, this is who we are and this is what we do and this is how we do it. And we've very intentionally shaped the business and shaped our practices with those things in mind. The ongoing hurricane, as you said, hasn't knocked us off kilter.
Doesn't sound like it. Well, yeah, can I ask you a question along with
Mm-hmm.
that? So one of the things that really got under my skin as everyone was transitioning to work from home was when you read the LinkedIn chatter, it was all about how to work from home. And I get that felt like a real business problem. That was not the real business problems going down at that time.
Nope.
In my mind is, how you work from home, you get your buns in a chair, you set up an office,
right.
You put on a worktop from the top up and you get on Zoom. Like that's how you work from home. And I know there's lots of factors going there and I'm not trying to be flippant about, folks that had e-learning and kids at home.
Right.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful there, but the business issues at stake were not about how do we get our people to work from home? So what were you able to get down to business about faster? Because that was just going from Tuesday to Wednesday for you all.
It was. And, so what that allowed us to do was to be focused on our customers as they were going through that transition, right? We didn't have to spend a lot of time going, so what are we going to do? Or how are we going to handle this? We just did it.
Yes.
And I didn't feel at all compelled to send out an email like every other vendor and partner and business I'm associated with did, going, our commitment to you during COVID-19. It didn't change, right? And not one of our customers turned around to us and went, so how's this going to affect you guys? We just kept going.
You were just living the commitment. You didn't have to communicate it in an email.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message.
Nothing was different.
Okay.
And our ability, and because we know our customers and we know their infrastructure and we know their IT operations, we knew certain customers, the majority of our customers, in fact, were also not going to have a problem. They were just going to go. I had 100+ person civil engineering firm, that uses big time CAD and has field teams and
Yes.
everything else.
Yep. High powered technology.
Yeah. Literally just go home.
That's fantastic.
And didn't generate support tickets, didn't have a problem, just went home and worked. And we had several customers like that, right? Who, because we'd already leaned towards a work from anywhere philosophy, and that's my thing, right? Is let's not talk about work from home. Let's talk about work from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And those folks had no problem. Now we had some other customers who, for a variety of reasons, maybe it was because of the nature of their business, maybe it was their maturity in the process. They were newer customers, for example. Hadn't gotten to that point yet. And they needed a lot of help. So the combination of the fact that we were able to just go, yeah, it's a Wednesday, and the fact that the majority of our other customers didn't need help meant that we could really focus on this small handful of people who needed our help the most.
Yeah, you had the capacity, you had the bandwidth, you had the mental energy, the resources to make it happen. Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's fantastic.
And that, I think, is the thing, right? How do you set things up in such a way that you're never, or very, very rarely, going to be in that position where you're going to exceed your capacity because everybody's having the same problem at the same time, right? Which means you have to think through. You have to think ahead. What's going to cause people to have that happen? And again, that's part of the proactivity, and it's part of the you have to measure, right? So what is our typical volume of support tickets, for example, right? And how many of those? How many incidents can a typical support team member handle? You have to know all that stuff in advance.
Yes. And you have to know what 100% capacity is, 110%, 85,
exactly.
50.
Right.
Not just the cash coming in the door, cash not coming in the door.
Exactly. If you haven't thought about those things, when something like this happens, you have an adjustment period.
Yes. Yeah. This season of the Hot Mess Hotline is brought to you by my Change Management Crash Course. This program is for the busy mid-level leader who needs to pivot out of this COVID-19 hot mess by creating new business results with an even stronger team. Go to changecrashcourse.com. Don't wait to become the pro troublemaker you've always wanted to be. What you're getting me to think of is two things that I want to go down the road here with you. So one is, it reminds me of a conversation I was having with a client. I'm coaching their leadership team, and before COVID-19, they were running at 110%, and they had at least 7 projects that were half-baked, like these really great ideas, infrastructure, technology upgrades that needed to happen to make their business better and more successful, but they were kind of a victim to their own success, signing up for every client that would take them, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things we were coaching around just last month is they realized this running at a breakneck speed all the time is wearing out their people. They don't know what true capacity is because they're trying to run at 110%. How can they build those systems in place to run at 85, 90% on the best of days, so that when a global pandemic happens again, because unfortunately it will happen again.
Right.
Yes. How can they be more prepared to ramp up in the right kind of ways like you guys did? So with that, here's my question to you that I want to hear your insight for these mid-level leaders, who are trying to think like entrepreneurs, trying to think like CEOs to better prepare their business. Full disclosure, friend, we are recording this on May 20th, 2020. We're moving into the recovery phase of this disaster. Up until now, we've kind of been in this response phase, this emergency response where we're trying to just hold it all together. And recovery is when we move back into the place where we can rebuild, restructure, redesign for the future. before we go into what is actually step one of disaster recovery, which is mitigation, which is where you create your plan. So a lot of learning that needs to happen for you. But so back to you, Doug, the question I have is, what do you hope that leaders at all levels take away from this situation to continue to create urgency for the changes that need to happen, for that process design, that stability, when there's not a global pandemic and everything seems normal?
Right. And man, that's just spot on, right? But the nature of what we do, the nature of what I've done my entire career, has always been heavily influenced by Murphy's Law. I exist in that place where what I get paid to do is to think about what could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes.
There are basically two kinds of IT guys. There are IT guys who stay in IT and play in IT until they're my age and older. And then there are the
And just for the listener's sake, Doug, you're a young baby boomer, older Gen Xer?
55. So
55. You're a Gen older Gen Xer right
I'm
there.
an older Gen Xer, right on the outside leading edge of Gen Xers. And then the other kind are the guys that never make it to my age because their heads exploded. And their heads exploded because they don't do what I'm about to talk about. And that is to always be thinking about what can go wrong. And it's a weird place to be sometimes. Early in our marriage, my wife was always like, man, you were such a downer. Everything you talk about how everything's going to go wrong. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. It's not that I want it to go wrong or I expect it to go wrong. But my thought process is to always think about how it could go wrong and prepare for that. And then if it doesn't, I'm ahead of the game. Okay? That's something that I think leaders of all types have to be doing with this situation and coming out the other side of it. If you are fat, dumb, and happy and operating at 110% when things are going well, and I got to cut some people some slack, right? I mean, we just came through the longest sustained economic boom in American history.
Truth.
Right? And
we were comfy. We were comfy because we were successful.
Right.
Yes.
We were very comfy because we were successful. And, there's a lot of leaders who came up during that 10, 11-year period who never really experienced the bad, right? I was through the dot-com crash, and then I was through the post 9/11 stuff, and then I was through the 2008 recession. I'm an old hand at this by now. It happens, whether it's a pandemic or it's something else.
Yes.
It's going to happen. So understand that it is. That's step one, right? And rather than approaching that from a perspective of fear, oh my God, what are we going to do?
They are two very different things. Yes. Thank you for saying
Completely different things, right? Approach it from the perspective of, so what do we have to do to get through this? Right? And start recognizing, again, because you're measuring that, hey, we're at 110% capacity. All of our people are stressed. All of our systems are stressed. All of our resources are stressed. What are we going to do about that, right? If something happens, how are we going to cope with it? Are we living on the edge? Because if you're living on the all the time and the equilibrium gets upset in any way, right, you're going to fall.
Yes.
If you feel like you are, remember that feeling when you were a kid and you were running down a hill really fast.
Yes. For me, it was the bike. I don't do the running thing, but the bike, yes.
and you were going so fast, like you just knew you were going to you were going to crash.
Mm-hmm.
You were running faster than your legs, or you couldn't control the bike, and you were going to crash. If your business feels like that, then it's time to take a step back, right? It's time to start planning for what are we going to do when, we hit that little patch of ground where we trip or we hit the pothole with our bike and we're going to go over the handlebars.
I still have my scar from when that happened, Doug.
Yeah, I got some of them too.
Well, let me ask you this. Yeah, that's and what you're bringing up is perfect. And as a person whose job is to bring a bit of joy and optimism to the world, for you, how do you know the thin line between your bike is going too fast, you're going to hit that pothole and go over the handlebars? I've got my scar on my shoulder to prove I did that one. But then there's also a point where you sense that you're going too fast and it turns into the hands up moment. Enjoy the ride. Be grateful that you have the bike and the speed and the wind in your hair. How do you know the difference?
Yeah. And that's a good question, right? I mean, we're kind of there right now in our business where, it's going great. Things are going really well for us. Probably some of the best time that we've had in history. And it would be real easy to just kind of lay back in the weeds, right? Instead of doing that, it's that constant feeling of, or that constant sense of, what's gonna go wrong, and trying to look forward enough. Part of doing that, again, are having given enough thought to predictive metrics. Not, so often companies are focused on steering by the wake.
What do you mean by that? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so it's a nautical term where, let's say you're trying to steer a ship, and instead of looking out over the bow of the ship to see where you're going, you're looking over the stern of the ship and observing the wake. And as long as you're in line with the wake behind you, you must be going straight. Well, that's great up until there's an island in front of the bow that you can't see. If all the metrics you're looking at, for example, are financial metrics,
which are lagging indicators.
They're lagging indicators,
yes,
right?
Okay.
So you're steering by the wake.
Yes.
You're going, hey, last week was great. Last quarter was great. Well, that's wonderful, but that was last week or last quarter, right? It didn't tell you about anything about tomorrow.
Yes. Okay.
So what are the predictive metrics that you need to keep an eye on? As we mentioned earlier, right? How many people don't look at cash flow? Right? They're looking at P&L, but they're not projecting cash flow. Our model, fortunately for us, is a 100% recurring revenue model. And it makes it very easy for me to project cash flow, right? I mean, go, look, I know I'm going to have this much coming in if we don't sell anything. I know I'm going to have this much in expense based on our normal recurring regular expenses. So therefore, I can look out, 90 days or longer and be really, really cognizant that I've got these costs. And this is what my cash flow looks like. That's, not everybody's going to have as clean a cash flow projection, but cash flow is a really big one for small and mid-sized businesses.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's the cash flow for your company or the cash flow for your division, or whether there is some other really concrete. And this is, again, a big part of it. It's got to be concrete. It's really, really easy to lie to yourself about some of this stuff.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, guilty as charged sometimes. Full disclosure to everyone listening. I
Happens
run
to
a successful
everybody.
business, but yes, yeah, there are traps.
It happens to everybody. And one of the things that we're really, really adamant about using the cash flow metric, and you have to do this with any metric, forward-looking metric. If it's not concrete, don't include it. Right? It would be really easy for me to look at things I have in the sales pipeline, projections, and go, well, let's add those in the cash flow, right? Because I think I'm going to close that in 45 days. Nope,
No.
don't do that.
No.
Right? It could not happen. It could happen a lot. It could take a lot longer. It could change. It could be smaller. It could be larger, whatever. But don't do that, right? Stay focused on what's real.
Yes.
And I think that's how you avoid that we feeling, right? Is it's really easy to go there by assuming and making the projection of, yeah, I'm going really fast and this is just going to keep going and it's going to be great. But you don't know that, right? What do you know? We far too often kid ourselves about things that we don't actually know. Hope is not a strategy.
No, sir, it is not. No, sir.
It's great to be a hopeful person. It's great to be an optimistic person, right? I'm not saying be a pessimist, but I am saying be concrete. And it's tough, right? Because we're surrounded by a lot of self-help stuff and sales stuff and all kinds of rah stuff. And it's tough to be the person that comes in and goes, now wait a minute, we don't actually know that. It's not enough to be enthused.
No. And I get it. I'm easily excitable, Doug. Like, yeah. I get excited about everything. But yeah, you got to turn that into action.
Right. If you're not doing something with it, right? And
yes.
It's got to be concrete. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be concrete. You've got to have some idea of, if I do X, I should get result Y. And then I got to close that feedback loop, right? If I didn't do it, if I did it and it didn't result in what I was after, I have to take the time to do the introspection to think about why it didn't produce the desired result.
That's right. That debrief process, that reflection. Yes,
right. The reflection, the debrief process, and simply going, well, gosh, I got to get up and try harder. That's necessary but not sufficient.
Yes.
Okay. Love it. It's wonderful. You're right. You got to have that baseline. Yeah, I got knocked down. I'm going to keep going, but it doesn't get you there. There are tons and tons of people who work really, really hard and have never bettered their own situation. It's not about just working hard. It's about executing intelligently. And executing intelligently requires measurement and requires feedback loops.
Yes. Well, with that, can I ask you two last questions and we'll wrap up this conversation for our listeners. I've learned so much. I love your perspective. That's why I wanted to share that with everybody else. So the second to the last question is, knowing that something like this will happen again, as you said, you've been through it, right? It seems like the pattern in our economy is about once every 10 years-ish, as we're starting to get really comfortable and like, oh, we're going to ride this wave for a long time. Something kind of knocks us on our butt a little bit. But what has been revealed to you about your company that there's room for improvement? It could be stronger next time this hurricane passes through.
So we could always be stronger in having sufficient or additional resources, right? I'd always love to have a bigger cash buffer, for example, right?
Okay. Yes.
To have more resources. There's certainly been some things like on the expense side that, as we've taken a little bit of a look at things over the last 90 days or so and gone, man, did we really need that? Right?
Yes.
We're
tighten that up a little bit.
Yeah, tighten that up a little bit, right? I'm reminded kind of every day, and it's probably been even more thrust in my face during this pandemic, that I am my own worst enemy and I'm my company's own worst enemy. That as the leader, there are so many things that I need to be mindful of, cautious about, to think about before I react. It is easy to react.
Yes, sir.
It is much more difficult to react well.
To respond with thought.
Right, to respond with thought. A situation can crop up that disappoints me or makes me angry, and stopping to consider how I'm going to respond to that versus just reacting to it is a big deal.
Yes.
The other real challenge that I'm always struggling with, literally every day, is I've put together a great team. I need to let them do their jobs. It is tempting, and particularly here with us living remotely, we're all living in collaboration tools like Slack. And so I'm sitting here all day and I'm watching the team have conversations. I'm watching them encounter technical problems with customers where they need to step in and do something. And there's always this temptation for me to intervene. I'm the guy with 30, 45 years of technical experience.
Yes.
And I probably have some idea about what's going on. If I'm all the time intervening in those discussions, then pretty soon everybody else stops trying to do anything. They just wait for me to come up with a solution and tell them what to do.
Yes.
So if I'm going to continue to build capacity and sustainability in the organization, I actually need to learn to shut up.
I believe you, Doug.
It's tough.
Yes.
I had a guy who worked for me at one point who later went on to a pretty high-level executive position, and I actually ended up working for him. And he told me one time in a conversation, he said, the most compelling thing you ever told me about leadership is that very often the best thing is to do nothing and let the problem solve itself. Meaning, your team that you've built can go solve it as opposed to you having to intervene.
Yes.
And it's tough, particularly when you're an entrepreneur, particularly when you've been a hands-on person for much of your career, to step back, to not do it, to lead as opposed to do. And realizing that lead is sometimes a passive and not an active thing. So, probably one of the things that I've really seen that's a weakness of our company right now that I have to be really careful of going forward, particularly if we have another one of these situations, right, where you're surrounded by this impetus to do, right? Everybody is pushing on you to do as the leader. What are you going to do about this? Is to understand that if I've done the work right, really the best thing for me to do is to go on a vacation. Right? That that leadership may be not intervening
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to constantly being in the middle of it to, be some kind of hero.
Yes. I love that. I think that,
Hard
that
to do.
resonates with me. It is. It is. Well, so that segues nicely into the last question that I have for you. We've designed these conversations, this hot mess hotline for these mid-level leaders who one day maybe want to be, the entrepreneur. They want to be the CEO of their business. They want to be the big boss.
Mm-hmm.
As an entrepreneur and a CEO, what's your number one piece of advice to them right now in their careers?
It's to truly begin to understand how to take the longer view. Okay? Whether that's, you want to call it a strategic view, because sometimes it is, but we are so in business driven in many companies by that quarterly calendar, right? What are our results going to be this quarter? And this, obviously that's more true if you're in a public company. But learn how to build a sustainable organization. Learn how to build, and I think this is one of the things that was tough for me as I was coming up through the ranks and I was a mid-level leader. I wanted to be absolutely indisposable. If you make yourself essential, you're never going to get promoted out of that. You're never going to be able to advance beyond that. Right? It's that old cliche of never be the smartest guy in the room. And it's really about that, in terms of the whatever it is that your company does, never be the most competent one in the room. Or at least don't act like that.
Yes. So a bit of humility, a bit of be around people who can make you stronger and smarter and build you up.
Understand you're never going to do this on your own.
That's right.
And if you make it so that you're indispensable, nobody's ever going to give you the chance to do anything but that because you are indispensable. So build capacity, have an idea long term, and also understand that history says, right? I'm not one that believes history repeats, but history definitely rhymes. And there's going to be another thing.
Yes.
Right? It might be just in your company, or it might be in a worldwide, economy-wide situation like we're dealing right now, but it always happens. And if you've built capacity and built sustainability in your organization or you're part of the organization, then the other side of that is going to offer opportunities for you to move up and advance because you will have done well, your organization will have done well, your companies will have done well. And it'll be noted, it'll be seen, it'll be obvious that it wasn't, you didn't have to be a hero. And smart leaders, smart senior level leaders, pay attention to that, right? They're always grateful for the heroes, right? And heroes may get a lot of recognition, but if you watch, heroes don't often get promoted. They're really too valuable as heroes.
Yeah, fascinating perspective. My goodness. Well, friends, this has been the inaugural season of the Hot Mess Hotline. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Doug, for joining this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Yes, we are going to continue the conversation with season 2 here in a few short months, but we couldn't not talk about COVID-19. We could not talk about the global pandemic. I know folks are getting fatigued about it, but it's still a reality and it's still a business reality. And the opportunity is to make sure that we emerge from this even stronger than before. So that's the invitation, is take Doug's lessons today. Some of the notes that I wrote down, use those predictive measures, be concrete, put in the hard work. Don't be the hero, be the type of leader that creates sustainability, stability in your business, and rely on the experts, rely on your people to do the work that they're hired to do and that that they can do. So, all right, friends, on to the next hot mess that comes up in the economy, in our businesses, and I will see you all soon.